Hello everyone, my name is Pooja Rani and I'm a postdoc at University of Bern. Today I'm going to talk about our journal first paper, What Do Class Comments Tell Us? An Investigation of Comment Evolution and Practices in Pharo Smalltalk. This paper has been accepted as a journal first paper in empirical software engineering. We have done this work together with Zurich University of Applied Science, Switzerland and University of Auckland. So let's start. What are comments? A comment is a programmer-readable explanation or annotation in the source code of a program. Developers write code comments to explain the rationale behind their code. Or in this case, for example, for class comments, developer write class comments to present the overview of their classes or functions or important methods of a class, basically to give the details about their classes. There have been various work in this direction of comment. For example, talking about how important comments are or how they help developers in various program comprehension and maintenance tasks, how developers trust them more often than other forms of documentation. Now, as we know that code comments are written in natural language, this has various advantages and also various disadvantages. For example, as an advantage, it gives developers a lot of flexibility to express themselves more freely, that why they are writing in certain way, why the algorithm is implemented in a certain way than other way, and why they think this is the right way or wrong way, or what modification can be made in future. Now, in terms of disadvantages, this makes it hard to identify a particular information from comment, a difficult task. Also, to overall assess quality of a comment, whether a given information is correct or consistent, it also makes difficult. So therefore, lot of studies started focusing on looking at what is inside comments. Now, as we know, different languages use different notations to write code comments. It's also not an easy task. And what is done in one language cannot be magically migrated to other language. This is an example of a Smalltalk class comment, and if you look in a bit detail, it's not exactly the same as Java class comment. So here in Smalltalk class comment, it's written a bit different, and this class comment is basically taken from Pharo software system, which is based on Smalltalk. If you look in detail, class comments are separated from code and written in a specific window. Unlike Java, where comments are combined with the source code, here class comments specifically, are written in a separate window. They're written in different style also compared to other language. For example, the first line written using first person pronoun indicates the intent or summary of the class, what this class is about. Then developers also write examples to show how to use this particular class. And also specific implementation detail about this class. As you can see that Smalltalk class comments do not use any specific notations like Java doc, tags or anything to denote an information. Thus, previous techniques from Java and Python to identify an information from comment or to assess the quality of comments might not work as expected. To summarize, in Pharo, class comments are a main source of documentation. So class comments can contain high-level design information to low-level implementation details. There is also no strict comment convention such as tags to write comments. Also, there is not enough tool support to check all aspects of comments. And there is a lack of empirical studies to know about commenting practices of developers. Now, all of this lack of knowledge basically makes using previous technique from Java or Python in such environment a non-trivial task. To adopt these techniques and make them work in this environment require a lot of empirical knowledge. Therefore, we study Smalltalk class comments in this experiment. We basically analyze comments from three different perspectives. commenting practices of developers, what information developer write inside comments, and do they follow the comment template, or let's say the style guideline, when writing the comments or not. In the first perspective, we basically looked at the evolution aspect of comments, how often developers are writing over the versions, and do they update their comments, or do they add comments to old classes or not. For this study, we basically consider Pharo software system. It's a live programming environment for Smalltalk software systems, and it's written in Smalltalk. That's an interesting thing. The system first appeared in 2008. Therefore, it provides a long history to analyze Smalltalk comments. And since 2008, there have been various versions. Now, currently, it's Pharo 9. We analyze basically 11 years of history of this system. Now, when looking at comments, we looked at how often comments and code were changing and whether developers were adding comments to old classes or not. And what we saw is that often developers change code of old classes, but they do not really update comments, while 50% of comment changes were related to code changes. So for example, if we found that somebody added an information in comment, there are 50% chances that it's maybe because somebody added a method or somebody removed a method. There were updates about it. Looking specifically at what kind of changes developers were making, we saw that developers add or update comments of old classes. Now, in initial versions of Pharo, they focused basically on adding comments to old classes, and then in subsequent versions, they focused on updating comments of old classes. This shows that it's not that once a comment is written, developers never look back at that comment. No, they go back and then they add or remove or update comments. How often? Not so often they remove comments. Most of the time they update comments. In the next perspective, we looked at what developers write inside these comments, what information they were writing. So in terms of information type, as I mentioned, that let's say developers embed different kind of information in class comment, intent, example, implementation detail, and many more. We don't know. Unlike Java and Python, there is also no comment taxonomy available for Smalltalk. So in this work, we basically looked at 7 versions of Pharo, and we sampled 364 from these 7 versions, and we manually analyzed to see what comments contain. What we found is that Smalltalk class comments contain 23 types of information. Now here is what those information type looks like. Now if you look, the intensity of this color shows how frequent that information is in which version. So in the x-axis, we can see all the information types, and on y-axis, we have different Pharo versions, and in parentheses, the number of comments we have analyzed from that particular system. Here, we could see that there are certain information types which developers frequently write in class comments. These are mostly about the high-level overview of the class. In addition to that, we also found some interesting information type. We found that developers were exchanging information like a discourse, doing some chat in these comments. Also, they were writing recommendation for future developers, which can be very useful for maintenance tasks. However, the difficulty remains how to identify or spot this information. Now, all these information types that we have analyzed, we extracted class comments from Pharo core system. For example, the core libraries like strings, streams, file, core libraries. So we expected that the core developers would be more aware of commenting practices, or at least they will try to follow these practices more often than other developers who are using this system. So we also analyze some external systems which are basically based on Smalltalk to see that Do core developers vary from these external Smalltalk developers or not? Core developers means Smalltalk core developers vary from external. Now we know that how often developers are writing comments and what do they write inside this comment. We basically then looked at when developers are writing this comment, do they follow some style guideline or not? And what guidelines do they follow? Now, just to give a brief overview of what are coding style guidelines. So coding style guidelines suggest conventions to write informative or consistent comments to developers. Each language community propose their own style guideline. For example, Java have Oracle style guideline, Python provide PEP guidelines on how to write comment. Similarly, Smalltalk also provide certain guidelines on how to write comment. For example, here the first is state a one line of summary, which tells basically that developers should write summary of a class, and then the summary should be written in first person style. Now, different from other languages, Smalltalk have a small default class comment template. So whenever somebody adds a new class, this default class comment template is added to it. And now this class comment template is based on class responsibility and collaborator design, which basically tells developer, hey, please write summary of a class, write the responsibility of a class, and then write who it collaborates with. And there are some other type of information that this template suggests developers to write. What we basically did is we analyzed this comment template and we compared it against the class comments. So basically we looked at to what extent class comments follow the template. In terms of information types, we found that this comment template suggests 7 types of information. And these 7 types of information are actually found more often in comments than other types of information, at least indicating that yes, developers write template inspired information types more often than others. Now, we also looked at, we also compared that what are the rules from this template which developer more respect to or often violate. What are these particular rules? So what we did is from this template, we extracted different kind of rules. Like for example, write summary. The summary should be written in first person, or key messages, right? The important methods of the class. And then we looked at how often developers were following or violating these rules, and we found that 31% of rules were followed. Similar amount of rules were also violated. We looked in detail what kind of rules are these that developers often violate, and we saw that the rules were about like writing instance variable of a class. This rule was often violated. Then, in addition to the rules that were followed or not followed, there were a lot of rules which were not applicable on comments. For example, a template suggests developer to write summary and then how this summary should be written. If there is no summary, then how it should be written is not applicable on comment. So we found 40% of such rules, which shows that developers do not always adopt convention. So given this overview, in future work we can look at like identifying particular rules that are often respected or that are often are violated can be very helpful to help developers keep their comments consistent. Or also the rules that are not adopted, finding reasons behind why they do not get adopted, or what's the problem with these rules or these guidelines. The main takeaway of this study is that developers embed 23 types of information in class comments, and they follow template-inspired information types more often than others. This indicates that giving any default template can be actually helpful for developers. The ultimate goal of automatically assessing comments is still far away. There's a lot of knowledge required for us to establish these techniques. that what is inside, how to extract it, how to assess it. So we look or we envision various future directions for this. For example, which information types do developers find important among these 23? Uh, there would be some information types which will be important for some developers, while others might not be useful. So depending on what kind of developer is working with comments, we can suggest or recommend them to write other missing types. Also, how do various information types support developers in which particular task one information support other developers? For example, warning can help them in modifying a class in maintenance phase, or how to extend a class. This information might be very helpful when they are extending a particular class. And then the question comes is how to extract them automatically. In our study, we found a lot of heuristics to identify these type of informations, and we believe that these heuristics can be very helpful for establishing machine learning techniques, or at least the supervised machine learning technique, because now we have the idea of what the features would look like for these categories. So thank you very much. This